Hi, I'm Aelith Monroe. My sister once handed me an apron at our family buffet and said, "This isn't a free meal line." 3 minutes later, the manager called me CEO. But the worst part wasn't the insult. It was the years before that, when they smiled at me, used me, then quietly erased me. From meetings, from memories, even from photographs. They didn't just forget me. They rewrote the story as if I'd never existed. What would you do if your own family treated you like a ghost, while living in a house you helped build? The air smelled faintly of warm bread and artificial citrus cleaner, the kind used in public restrooms and chain restaurants to mask something deeper. I stepped into Monroe's table, my family's buffet franchise flagship, and the weight of 100 small silences hit me at once. Some glanced my way. A few nodded politely, like I was the cousin of someone they used to like. Most didn't even bother. Forks clinked against cheap plates. Someone chuckled too loud in a corner booth, and the overhead lights flickered like they had better things to do. I stood still for a second, scanning the room. This place hadn't changed much. Plastic plants, faded inspirational quotes framed along the walls. A rusted plaque near the entrance still said, "Family is the heart of this house," though the only thing that felt like it beat here was the sound of backroom politics. And then I saw her. Kalista, radiant in that curated way, hair sprayed just enough, blouse designer but business casual coded, was stationed near the salad bar, surrounded by people who used to talk behind her back, but now laughed too loudly at every word. The kind of crowd that formed not around merit, but momentum. She saw me the moment I walked in. "Aelith!" she called out, smiling too wide. "Oh, good, you made it!" I nodded, approaching slowly. That smile was always a prelude to impact. I hadn't even made it to the buffet line before she tilted her head and, without missing a beat, turned to the group next to her and said, "This isn't a free meal line, Aelith." She said it like a joke, a casual jab, a dig dressed in sisterly affection. The room caught it like a tennis ball, paused midair, and then they laughed. Light chuckles, polite amusement, a few nervous smiles. My hand tightened around the strap of my purse. I forced a half smile, the kind I'd worn too many times at family gatherings, where being quiet was safer than being right. No one stepped in. Not Mom, not my uncle, not the woman from marketing who used to copy off my notes during quarterly planning. They just kept eating. It didn't sting. It burned. Because they weren't laughing at the joke. They were laughing at the permission it gave them. They never really saw me as one of them, did they? I thought. I was the girl who had been useful. The backup babysitter. The last-minute server when staff no-showed. The one who made things work without needing applause. Kalista didn't stop there. As I moved toward the drinks, she approached with a folded black apron in hand. She held it like it was a peace offering, but her eyes glinted. "Here," she said sweetly, pressing the fabric into my hands. "Thought you could help out a little today. I mean, since you're already here. Might as well pitch in." Behind her, our cousin Terry snorted. "She always had a knack for being useful," Terry mumbled, sipping her mimosa. "Remember that one Easter when she refilled the deviled eggs without being asked?" Laughter again. I stared down at the apron. Cotton, size medium. Still warm from the dryer. Not one person stepped forward. Not one said, "She's not a staffer." I didn't flinch. Didn't roll my eyes. I just held the apron, then slowly laid it on the nearest table and stepped back. That moment? It wasn't rage. It was clarity. I remembered standing in the kitchen at age 13, refilling mashed potatoes while Kalista took credit for planning the menu. I remembered cleaning up after a family event in college while they toasted to her internship. That role? The silent fixer? I retired it years ago, but apparently someone forgot to update the cast list. I turned without a word and walked toward the entryway. My heels tapped softly against the tile, each step a reminder I wasn't here for forgiveness or recognition. I leaned against the wall near the vending machine, watching the flickering neon sign buzz and groan above the glass doors. Monroe's table, in half-lit red. It would only take a few more minutes, because while they were busy laughing at old roles and recycled insults, I was waiting for a man in a gray blazer to walk through that door and say what I'd been waiting to hear for a long time. I didn't need to prove anything to them. I just needed to let them watch. "They'll see me," I whispered to myself, straightening my spine. Not because I shouted, but because I stayed. They say the best revenge is not in destruction, but in undeniable existence. This ends today. A movement caught my eye. A man in a crisp shirt, earpiece glinting beneath his blazer lapel, stepped into view. He scanned the room, spotted me, and smiled as he approached. "Ms. Monroe," he said, voice low and even. "The board is ready for you." And just like that, everything shifted. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Ms. Monroe," the man in the gray blazer said, cool and clear, like he had said it a dozen times before. "The board is ready for you." And just like that, the clatter of cutlery around the buffet went quiet. Heads turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. You could have heard a soda fizz from across the room. I didn't rush. I didn't smile. I simply nodded, adjusted the strap of my purse, and walked past the table where my sister sat, still clutching her wineglass like it was an anchor. Their eyes followed me as the man guided me past the sneeze guards and stacks of plastic plates, down the narrow corridor lined with frosted glass doors. I caught a few whispers behind me. Did she just say Ms. Monroe? No way. That Aelith? I kept walking. I wasn't here to answer their questions. I was here to end them. Desmond was waiting by the conference room. His demeanor didn't shift like the others. His respect for me had been earned long before today. He opened the door and gestured me in. "Glad you're here," he said. "Shall we finalize the closing?" I nodded, stepping into the glass-walled room that faced the main dining floor. They could all see us now, and for once, I didn't feel small behind the pane. I sat, opened the folder, and signed where I had already memorized. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an affirmation. Desmond slid a nameplate across the polished table. My name. The title below it, CEO. Outside, someone dropped a fork. I didn't look up. Let them sit in it. Weeks ago, Desmond and I had met in a small office 2 towns over. No cameras, no announcements, just quiet agreement and mutual clarity. He had run the operation for years while Kalista polished her image. He knew the soul of this place, and he knew I had come back not to reclaim something, but to reroute it. As I finished reviewing the documents, a younger employee barged in, clearly unaware of the shift. "Ma'am, you can't be in here. This area's for execs only." He was flustered, fumbling with a tray of dessert samples. Desmond looked up calmly and said, "She is the exec. The one." The poor kid's eyes widened as he looked from Desmond to me, then back out the window toward the dining area. His face turned a shade paler than his starched shirt. "No worries," I told him gently. "You're just doing your job." He nodded quickly and backed out of the room. My gaze moved outside again. Kalista stood near the carving station, lips pressed tight, her wine untouched. Our mother leaned toward her, whispering something, their eyes locked on me. I didn't wave, I didn't smirk. I just sat there, solid in a seat they never imagined me filling. It wasn't about humiliating her. It never was. The truth was doing that just fine without my help. A few minutes passed. People returned to their plates, though now the conversations were softer, more calculated. A cousin texted me from across the room. "You didn't tell anyone?" I looked at the message, then up through the glass. Why would I? They never asked. Desmond leaned over slightly. "Shall we call the board in for the photo?" I stood and adjusted the lapel of my blazer. Through the glass, I caught my sister's eyes again. But this time, the look she gave me didn't say confusion. It said war. They say silence can be louder than noise, and that glass, when thick enough, keeps voices in but lets shame seep through. I sat alone in the boardroom, eyes fixed not on the laptop in front of me, but on the window it faced. My reflection stared back at me, older, colder, steadier. Behind it, through the glass, I saw them all. Family, colleagues, observers, circling trays of lukewarm food, casting glances toward the room like it was both sacred and scandalous. To them, this was a conference room. To me, it had been a battlefield. 2 years ago, I walked into this same space full of hope, hands shaking slightly as I queued up my slides. I'd spent weeks building the proposal, revitalizing locations with modern tech, updating branding, targeting a new generation without losing legacy customers. I'd barely gotten through the second slide when Kalista leaned back in her chair, one leg crossed over the other, and said, "This isn't a college project, Aelith. We need real business solutions." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. A few chuckles followed. Not loud, just enough to confirm whose side the oxygen was on. One of our cousins, who now called himself Senior VP of Brand Culture, smirked and muttered something I didn't catch but understood. The kind of dig men like him think won't stick, but they always do. I kept going, eyes on the data, voice steady. But by the time I got to the final recommendation slide, the room had mentally left me. Kalista was already texting. Someone else was talking about shipping delays. After the meeting, I returned to my desk to log back into the system, only to find my access revoked. No warning, no message. I emailed Kalista, nothing. I called the tech lead. He stammered. "All systems are being streamlined," he said. "Nothing personal." It was always personal. That night, I poured myself a drink, stared at my laptop, and quietly deleted the shared drive folder I had built with hours of unpaid work. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. That day, I stopped offering. I started building, outside their walls, on my terms. A few months later came the company's 25th anniversary, a flashy live stream with videos, speeches, and tributes. I watched from my friend Camille's living room, laptop propped between us. The slideshow started, family photos, product launches, team celebrations. "Wait," Camille said after 5 minutes. "Where are you?" I watched, waited. Even the group photos where I had stood next to Kalista were cropped tighter. My body erased, but the backdrop remained the same. "Did they erase you on purpose?" she whispered. I didn't answer, didn't cry. Just closed the screen, leaned back, and listened to the dishwasher hum behind us. They didn't just forget me. They edited the proof I was ever there. Back in the present, I shook off the memory and tapped open a folder labeled Fin Approvals. The audit trail was clean, cold, and methodical. Every document approved by Kalista. Every spending note. Every quiet misuse of company funds buried under vague terms like strategic appearance enhancement. I didn't need to hack the system. I owned it now. I began highlighting. Not for vengeance, for record. That's the thing about keeping receipts. You don't bring them out to burn bridges. You bring them out to prove you never imagined the fire. The door clicked open. Desmond stepped in, holding a tablet and a slightly furrowed brow. "Your sister just requested access to the financials," he said. Again. I closed the file, eyes still on the screen. "Let her try," I said. I kept the receipts. Desmond handed me the folder, with quiet precision, like he already knew I didn't need more instructions. I took it without looking down, the weight of it enough. As I turned the corner toward the private lounge, the low hum of clinking glasses and forced laughter reached my ears before the door did. They were already celebrating. Inside, the room reeked of citrus and cheap perfume, Kalista's signature blend of curated elegance and strategic discomfort. She was at the center, of course, holding court with her signature cocktail in hand. My mother sat beside her, nodding along to whatever narrative she was spinning this time. A few cousins lingered close, orbiting her like she was still gravity. It was muscle memory by now, watching them position themselves, aligning reputations like chess pieces at every family event. I stood by the doorway just long enough to absorb it, then moved toward the sideboard under the pretense of grabbing water. She saw me instantly. Her eyes flicked from the folder in my hand to my face, then back again. She smiled like she always did, warm enough to fool a stranger, sharp enough to cut blood from kin. "Hope they're not making you do all the heavy lifting already," she said loudly. "Or, wait, maybe you're just back to doing what you're good at." Laughter broke out, light but deliberate. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not while my mind was already back in that ballroom 18 months ago. It had been the company's holiday charity gala. I showed up, dressed appropriately, hair done, slides rehearsed. When I approached the head table, my place card was missing. Gone. Replaced by the name of one of Kalista's PR friends. A woman who had nothing to do with the campaign being honored that night. A campaign I created. A junior staffer pulled me aside with that sheepish corporate tone and said, "We had to make a last-minute adjustment. Hope that's okay." They moved me to a corner table, next to the kitchen entrance. I spent the evening watching servers hustle, while applause roared for my sister on stage, calling it her vision brought to life. It wasn't a public takedown. It was surgical, strategic, like all her moves. No knives, just absence. Sometimes you don't lose your seat at the table. They just never hand you a chair. Back in the lounge, I placed my glass down. I didn't intend to speak, but Kalista wouldn't stop. As I walked past her toward the exit, she raised her voice just enough for the room to pause. "Since you're already walking back and forth, Aelith, would you mind grabbing the dishes?" The room erupted. The kind of laughter that feeds off discomfort. The kind that needs a target. I stood frozen, back turned. They still think I'm the assistant. I picked up the tray of used glasses near the bar. The room quieted. Not because they respected the gesture, but because they didn't expect it. Then I turned. I walked toward the youngest cousin, the one still in college, who had snickered loudest. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Be careful how you laugh, sweetheart. You never know who's doing your payroll next quarter." The silence that followed was different, heavier. Kalista's grip on her glass tightened. Her smile vanished mid-pose. I placed the tray gently back where I'd picked it up. I didn't drop it. I didn't slam it. That would have been too easy and too loud. The real power came in the restraint. I walked out without another word. In the hallway, Desmond was leaning against the wall, arms crossed. "You didn't have to carry that tray," he said softly. I paused next to him, smoothing my sleeve. "That wasn't a tray," I replied. "That was a line being drawn." My phone buzzed. A single message. "Mom wants to talk. Alone." Of course she does. Now that I'm inconveniently visible. The courtyard was still warm from the afternoon sun, but the lights strung across the fence flickered on, casting a soft glow over the brick path and iron benches. I stepped through the archway slowly, spotting my mother near the far corner, seated beneath the old maple tree she used to call the best shade in the family. I didn't say anything right away. She didn't stand. "You didn't have to make such a statement today," she said, gently adjusting the hem of her cashmere cardigan. Her voice wasn't angry. It was measured. An old politician's tone. I sat across from her and folded my hands. "Then maybe you shouldn't have written me out of the last decade." We didn't speak for a moment. Just the hum of insects, distant laughter from the kitchen staff, the faint clink of glassware clearing out for the night. Earlier that day, I'd slipped an envelope into Kalista's purse. I'd timed it well. Just after the last meeting, before she had a chance to grandstand near the dessert bar. She hadn't noticed it until I was halfway across the room. Inside was a gold-trimmed card. Clean. Minimal. The handwritten message read, "Thank you for everything you claimed." I didn't need her to open it in front of anyone. She knew what it meant. Still, I watched from across the lounge as she pulled it out. I saw the shift in her expression, barely a blink, but her fingers froze on the paper for just a second too long. Her grip tightened, then loosened. She tucked it away without comment. No one else noticed. That was the point. They used to call me too sensitive. Said I overthought things, that I needed to toughen up. No, I just learned to be specific. I remembered bringing coffee to meetings and being thanked only when someone else mentioned it. Remembered designing entire campaigns and being told I was good at the technical stuff. My mother adjusted in her seat and crossed one ankle over the other. "He called me," she said. I didn't have to ask who. "Your father regrets how the boardroom situation went 2 years ago." I raised an eyebrow. "Did he say that before or after the headlines changed?" He said he thought he was doing what was best for the company. He was listening to the loudest voice, I finished for her. She didn't deny it. I'd gotten his voicemail a month ago. It came in at 11:47 p.m. I was brushing my teeth. His voice was slower than I remembered, less sharp, more measured. "I thought I was doing what was best," he said. "But I see now, I was just listening to who spoke loudest. I think you deserved better." I never called back, but I kept the recording, not because I needed to hear it again, but because sometimes fuel looks a lot like closure. Mom looked at me, eyes softer now. "Maybe it's time we discuss your role in the family again." There it was. The real reason for this meeting. "I'm not applying for re-entry," I said, tone flat. "I'm building something you can't write me out of." She exhaled, almost a sigh, but not quite defeat. Just calculation. "You've changed," she murmured. "No," I replied. "I just stopped making myself smaller so other people could feel bigger." I stood, dusted off my slacks. She stayed seated. As I turned to leave, she spoke again, voice low and deliberate. "Kalista's planning something." I paused mid-step, then looked back over my shoulder, eyes steady. So am I. The office was cold, colder than I remembered, or maybe that was just me. Desmond had left me with a nod and a glance that said more than words ever could. I needed space. He knew that. I shut the door behind me and listened for the quiet. Nothing but the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the slow tick of the wall clock I hadn't seen since before the pandemic. I sat at the same desk that used to belong to my father, then to Kalista, and now, legally, operationally, me. There are truths that whisper in spreadsheets, and some that scream. I powered on my laptop. The password felt like muscle memory now, even though I'd only used it a few weeks. I opened the secured folder I'd been building since before I stepped foot back in this building. 8 months ago, I had flown to Chicago under a different name. That's how these meetings work, when the power you want doesn't come with applause, but with paperwork. A friend of a friend introduced me to a private investor circle known for their discretion. The man who led the meeting looked at me like I was a chessboard he'd already solved. He listened patiently as I explained what the Monroe brand could be, if removed from family theatrics. When I finished, he leaned back, laced his fingers, and said, "You don't need to win a seat at their table, Ms. Monroe. Buy the damn table." So I did. Quietly. Strategically. Through a shell company that held no name, no direct ties. I purchased 38% of the company. Enough for control. Just shy of a majority, just enough for weight. There was no press release, no welcome post. I wasn't here to be congratulated. I was here to correct the course. They thought I'd vanished. Truth is, I was in the wiring. Back in the present, I opened the purchasing records, Kalista's Kingdom of Expenditures. Each entry was clean on the surface, nothing screamed theft. But the whisper was in the pattern. Spa treatments in Napa, luxury hotel stays in Manhattan, a weekend leadership retreat in the Hamptons for strategic alignment. Guest list included no other executives. Boutique fashion vendors. Transportation services listed under brand positioning. All signed, all approved, all buried under budget lines like employee wellness or brand development. I didn't rage. I didn't shake. I highlighted, dated, categorized, printed quietly, sheet by sheet, each one a brick in the case I wasn't building out of anger, but out of necessity. She stole under the banner of stewardship, I murmured to myself, fingers gliding across the mousepad. I pulled screenshots, attached PDFs, drafted a timeline. At the bottom of my notes, I typed, "Speak when necessary, show when undeniable." The folder was complete within the hour. I labeled it Compliance Exec Review. I copied it to a secure external drive, backed it up twice, and then scheduled a message to legal, timed for 7:30 a.m. sharp. Subject line: Attached, documents supporting audit findings. They wouldn't need commentary, just clarity. The door creaked open softly. Desmond poked his head in. "She just left," he said, voice quiet. "Alone." I didn't look up. I closed the last window, shut the laptop, and pulled the drive free. "She won't be for long," I said. Because the storm wasn't coming, I was the storm. My phone was already vibrating before I opened my eyes. A dozen missed calls, 6 unread messages, 1 notification that made my stomach flip. Monroe's table feud erupts online. The headline sat smugly at the top of the trending page like it belonged there. It read, "New CEO's family feud erupts over Monroe's table legacy." I didn't need to click. I already knew the tone, controlled outrage with a sprinkle of curated sympathy. There was a quote in the subhead from Kalista. "She blindsided us. She's not here to lead, she's here for revenge." That didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how fast she'd moved. She must have recorded that interview before yesterday's audit report even hit legal. She'd been ready. She always was when the spotlight needed adjusting. I turned on the kitchen lights, poured coffee, and sat with the article open in one tab, her video in another. In it, Kalista sat across from a local media anchor, hair perfect, eyes slightly misted. "I gave my life to this company," she said. "She left. She didn't care about the foundation we built. And now she's back with lawyers and accusations." Classic reverse victim play. The comment section was on fire, split down the middle. Half of them were buying it. The others, not so much. "She gave her life?" someone wrote. "Did her life include a luxury spa in the Hamptons?" I didn't respond. I just screenshotted everything, every sentence, every false claim, every timestamp, no counterstatement, no public rebuttal. Let the volume expose the cracks. When you've got receipts, you don't need a bullhorn. You just need good lighting. I closed the tabs and opened a new document. My actual report. The one backed by files, not feelings. The one that didn't need emotion to hit hard. This wasn't a media war. It was a governance cleanup. But that didn't mean I'd forgotten the last time Kalista tried to rewrite the story in her favor. Last year, family dinner at the end of Q4. We were celebrating a national award Monroe's Table had received for innovative brand vision. That award came from a campaign I built, right down to the analytics and rollout. And yet, our mother stood up, raised her glass, and said, "To Kalista, the backbone of this business, the one who kept us afloat." Everyone clinked glasses, smiled, posed for a photo. I smiled too. But inside, something broke cleanly, like a branch finally snapping under the weight of its own denial. Even silence can scream when the room refuses to hear you. Now, my mother hadn't called, hadn't texted, not since Kalista's media tour began. But I wasn't waiting. Desmond's email came mid-morning. "She's distancing herself publicly. Watch the timing." That told me everything. So I clicked send on my own message. It wasn't flashy, it was efficient. Subject: Audit Support Governance Action. Body: Attached, timeline, receipts, flagged policy breaches. Forwarded to legal, compliance, and chair. There was no mic drop, just a paper trail too solid to dispute. That should have been the end of my morning. But my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. "You might want to check who's leaking your file." I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I turned the phone face down. Because family doesn't always stab you in the back. Sometimes they just sell you first. The boardroom was already full when I arrived. Not a whisper, not a greeting. Just chairs scraping and eyes tracking every step I took to my seat. a half circle of discomfort and suspicion. I set my folder down without flinching. Desmond stood against the back wall, expression unreadable. My attorney gave a small nod from across the table. No one smiled. It wasn't that kind of morning. I wasn't walking into a conversation. I was walking into containment. Or collapse. The chairperson cleared his throat and motioned toward me. Ms. Monroe, if you're ready. I opened the folder, placed the audit summary on the table, and didn't speak yet. Timing mattered. Halfway through my presentation, charts, receipts, timelines, one of the board members, the one who had always cozied up to Kalista during annual retreats, slid a laptop toward the center. No need to repeat anything, he said. We've seen this. He tapped play on the screen. There she was. Kalista, hair styled in her signature half bun. The Monroe logo behind her, centered like a crown. I spearheaded this solo, she said in the clip. We had no one else capable. The pitch was mine, word for word. My phrasing, my sequence, my concept, lifted whole from a pitch deck I had presented to her 2 years ago. Gasps trickled around the table. I didn't flinch, just reached for my coffee. Let it burn the back of my throat. Let them stew in their own silence. You don't win arguments in silence. You win them by letting the wrong people speak first. When the video ended, I passed out color-coded folders. Each one detailed how that campaign had been developed, revised, and delivered. By me. My time-stamped emails, the original keynote slides, file metadata that didn't lie. You didn't just plagiarize, I said aloud, though she wasn't in the room. You monetized it. No one argued. No one needed to. Legal cleared his throat. This constitutes a breach of internal code and IP ethics. The room didn't erupt. It deflated. One board member muttered, "This isn't a smear campaign. This is a cleanup." I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Kalista wasn't present, but I knew she was watching, probably from some corner suite or behind a tinted screen. I closed the folder and said calmly, I didn't come here to punish. I came here to protect what my family once meant. The chair nodded once, slowly. Meeting adjourned. I stepped into the hallway and exhaled the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Desmond was already there, eyes on his phone. When he looked up, his expression told me everything. She's been watching the live feed, he said, and she just walked in. I turned toward the hallway. Let her enter. I'm done knocking. Kalista didn't knock. She walked into the boardroom like she still ran it, like the last 48 hours hadn't cracked her armor wide open. The room turned in sync. No one smiled. No one stood. She didn't notice, or pretended not to. She looked straight at me and said, "So, got any room for forgiveness in that audit packet?" The laugh she let out after was more a shrug than a joke. I didn't laugh. I stayed seated. Did you come to explain or escalate? Her smile didn't falter, but her left hand clenched tighter around her phone. I noticed the tremble in her wrist before she tucked it behind her back. She tried to pivot, offered a rambling defense about legacy, confusion, and crossed wires. The kind of apology that wasn't really one. More spin than sincerity. I let her talk. That's the trick. When someone's digging their own grave, don't interrupt the rhythm. Then I slid a new folder across the table. "This is Luis's resignation," I said. "Read it aloud if you'd like." She didn't touch it, so I did. I joined to build something. I stayed to survive her. The room tensed. Luis had been with Monroe's table for 9 years, longer than most of the board had been awake during budget calls. He's not the only one, I continued. 3 other employees filed exit memos under NDA, protected under whistleblower clauses. You want to talk about culture? Let's talk about how many people stayed silent because they were afraid of what she'd say at the next staff meeting. I scanned the room. Numbers are clean, I said, but culture, it's polluted. The compliance officer closed his notebook without a word. One of the older board members muttered under his breath, "This is bigger than PR?" Kalista finally sat, slowly, like gravity had suddenly remembered she existed. Then, because timing really is everything, The lobby doors opened. A man in a navy blazer walked in, clipboard in hand. He looked like money and smelled like legacy. I recognized him from the investor call 2 weeks ago. He was supposed to meet Kalista for a brand development lunch. He glanced around and walked toward her. "You must be Kalista," he said, extending his hand. Before she could reach for it, I stood and stepped forward. "Aelith Monroe," I said, offering my card. "Owner, operator, legacy corrector." He looked at the card, then back at her. "Oh," he said, "that makes more sense." The pause that followed was heavy, like the room was holding its breath. Kalista took half a step back. She didn't speak, didn't need to. The moment spoke for her. There are moments when the hand you offer speaks louder than the hand you slap. I turned back to the board. "We don't need to vote on her narrative. We've already seen the footage. We've read the reports. She didn't just lose the room today, she lost the trust that built it." No one argued. I collected my folders and walked out first, not fast, but deliberate. Desmond was waiting in the hallway. "She's calling her lawyer," he said quietly, not asking for a reaction. I kept walking. "Let her, I've already called mine." This wasn't fallout, it was foreplay. The room smelled faintly of toner and old carpet glue. Exactly the kind of place where decisions got carved in quiet. I sat across from our corporate counsel, the compliance officer to my right, both of them flipping through the stack of papers laid out like evidence in a courtroom drama. There were no dramatics here, just facts, language, and signatures. "I'm not firing her out of vengeance," I said, voice steady. "I'm protecting the integrity of this company." Counsel gave a small nod. "Termination for cause," he said, tapping the bold header. "We've reviewed every instance, misappropriation, policy violations, ethical breaches." "Reputation damage," added compliance. "Irrefutable." I scanned the highlighted entries, notations on vendor abuse, misuse of discretionary funds, the Hamptons getaway disguised as a leadership retreat. All signed off by Kalista, all time-stamped. "This covers every angle," my attorney continued. "There's no slander here, only truth, with receipts." I signed. One flick of the pen. No hesitation. Not because I was angry, but because I was finished. This wasn't revenge. This was repair. Within an hour, a courier had delivered the documents to Kalista's condo. I didn't wait for her to respond. She wouldn't. Not directly. She preferred shadowboxing. Back at my desk, I drafted a company-wide memo. Nothing flashy, just clear. To the Monroe's Table team, we are entering a new chapter built on transparency, accountability, and care. We are not what we say on paper. We are what we tolerate in silence. From here forward, we tolerate less and build better. The replies started trickling in within minutes. Simple subject lines. "Thank you." "I stayed because I hoped." "I almost quit last year, not now." Then Desmond walked in, holding a small envelope. He handed it to me without a word. Inside was a folded note, unsigned. "She made it hard to breathe. You made it safe to speak again." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. Just sat with it. The weight of quiet gratitude always lands deeper than applause. Later that afternoon, news of the termination hit the wires. Articles spread, headlines debated. Comment sections swirled with opinion. Kalista said nothing, and I knew that wasn't her accepting defeat. It was her calculating the next play. But her silence didn't read as strategy to me. It read as surrender. It's not that they never cared. It's that they never thought I would fight. I opened my phone to clear the alerts and saw a message from my father. "You did what I never could. I hope you can live with it." I stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering above the reply. Then I typed, "I already have." The first thing I noticed when I stepped into the house was the quiet. Not the kind that felt empty, but the kind that felt earned. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't instinctively check for voicemails or prepare for incoming chaos. I dropped my keys in the bowl, kicked off my shoes, and let the stillness wrap around me like a blanket. A week had passed since Kalista's termination. A week of long hours, staff rebuilding, and strategic cleanups. The office had been a slow burn of cautious relief. No one celebrated out loud, but the tension in every hallway had eased. That was enough. I walked to the kitchen table, flipping through the stack of mail Desmond had forwarded from HQ. Mostly invoices. A few newsletters. One padded envelope, hand-addressed. My father's handwriting. I paused. That familiar script, careful, precise, always slightly right-leaning, stopped me more than any legal document ever had. I sat and opened it. Inside was a small wooden frame. Simple, no embellishment. The photo inside nearly buckled me. It was from my high school graduation, back when I thought family legacy meant applause, not accounting. In the original version, used at the company gala years ago, I had been cropped out. That wasn't speculation. It was confirmed when I'd seen the edited slideshow. But in this photo, I was there. Standing beside my father, hand on his shoulder, both of us smiling. On the back, a note in pen. "You've always stood here. I just forgot to turn around." I placed the photo on the shelf above my desk. Not to honor him, not to rekindle anything, but to remember my clarity. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about refusing to carry what they won't even acknowledge. That night, I journaled like I always do when the air feels too still. No big declarations. Just this. Power is only useful if it makes others safer. I thought about Kalista's final words in the boardroom. "You'll never replace me." But I wasn't trying to. I was reclaiming myself. Around 8 p.m., my phone rang. A cousin. "Hey, we're putting together the Thanksgiving list. Are you—" I didn't let her finish. "Tell them I'm not angry," I said. "I'm just full." Because that's what no one ever tells you about healing. You don't always come back to the table. Sometimes you build your own. And when they ask why you're not sitting with them, you say, "Because I no longer need to prove I belong." I poured myself tea and stepped onto the porch. The sun was just giving way to early fall shadows. The trees had started turning, a slow change, but a certain one. My phone buzzed again, this time with an alert from the HR system. One message. "Desmond. New hire orientation starts Monday. Thought you'd want to open it." I smiled. There's no satisfaction like building what no one can take from you. The room smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. Monday morning, and the orientation hall buzzed with quiet anticipation. I stood near the back, unnoticed by most, exactly as I wanted. Rows of chairs were filled with fresh faces, some eager, some anxious, most of them too young to know what the name Monroe once carried, or what it now meant again. They didn't know the stories carved into the corners of this building. They didn't need to. I wasn't here to inspire them. I was here to make sure they never needed saving the way I did. The HR director, clipboard in hand, smiled as he gestured toward the podium. "Would you like to say something?" I shook my head gently. "No need. The system works now. That's my voice." There was a pause, just a breath. But it rippled. A quiet understanding passed through the room. I stepped back, took a seat in the last row. A young woman in the third row turned slightly, caught my eye, and smiled. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. It was enough. I'd written a dozen emails over the past month, none of them sent. One for my mother. "I finally became everything you warned me against. And I sleep better now than I ever did trying to be your version of safe." One for my father. "It wasn't your silence that hurt. It was how long it took for you to notice it." One for Kalista. "I never finished it. Just one line lived in that draft. You lost more than your job. You lost the only person who still wanted to believe in you. This morning, before coming here, I deleted them all. Closure is a myth. Clarity is enough." Near the back entrance of the kitchen, I passed by a small plaque mounted near the staff lockers. Brushed steel, understated. "To every hand that builds with care. This is your house, too." No name beneath it. No date. That was the point. I stood for a moment, watching two servers lean in to read it. One of them ran their fingers gently along the edge. They didn't know it was mine. They didn't need to. Justice isn't the loudest voice in the room. It's the one that leaves the door open behind her and never looks back. I walked to my car alone. No press, no send-off, just the sound of my heels on pavement and the soft hum of a company I'd rebuilt from the inside out. This is where the story ends, for them. For me, it was always where it began.